my whole welcome to FMI speech ready, but you guys know it, my heart. So thank you for coming. It is our pleasure to provide this opportunity for a grants training workshop. As you know, we are a research institute, and our goal is to help provide support and resources for researchers here on campus. You guys know Frances McClelland, and she's always a good reminder for us about why we do what we do and the importance of resilience when we think about immigrant families and children and youth. Let's see, let's go and see. Oh, thank you. So just a reminder about our upcoming events. If you're not already registered, we are having a community university collaboration grants workshop that's going to be led by Dr. Sally Stevens. That's next Thursday morning, January 25th, 9 a.m. And that will be here in the same room. So just come back here again. And Sally is amazing. She has obtained lots and lots and lots of grants where she's worked in collaboration with community members. For a while, she had a building that was on the south side where they ran programs out of. She was the director of the Southwest Institute for Research on Women for many years. And I've seen her, I've collaborated with her, even in meetings with community members. I'm always really impressed at her ability to communicate with them and really find mutual agreement about doing projects together. So it's a great opportunity. I do ask you to register. It's a really small fee, $15. Definitely send it out to the other initiative folks or other grad students. Everybody's welcome. We have Francesca Lopez, who will be here Friday, February 2nd, and she'll be talking about asset pedagogies with Latino youth. She is fantastic. She's a tenured professor in the College of Education. So definitely come to her talk or watch it on Facebook Live, but try to connect with her. She's a wonderful connection for those of you, especially for students here on campus. After that, we'll have Dr. Francine Gachupin, who'll be here Friday, February 16th, and then we have the Faculty Data Blitz, and that'll be Monday, February 26th. And so, especially for students, that's the time that our visiting students will be here, and faculty will be doing very brief presentations about their current work. So it's a great way to find out what everybody has going on right now and how to get connected with those active research projects. So today we have Dr. David Marrero, who's with us. He's with the College of Public Health, but he is the executive director of the University of Arizona Center for Elimination. I love that, elimination of border health disparities. We're not even saying prevention. We're just gonna go full out and say, we're gonna get rid of all of them. So he's the director of that center. He provides leadership through the center to develop collaborative efforts to affect treatment of type 2 diabetes in border populations. He's an expert in diabetes education and research. His interests primarily focus on diabetes prevention, improving diabetes care practices, and the use of technology to facilitate care and education. He is working with the Regional Arizona Centers for Excellence in Clinical Research in Yuma and Nogales to provide mental health services for individuals with diabetes and providing culturally appropriate programs. His original training is in social ecology from the University of California, Irvine. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. This is an unusual thing for me. They've asked me to talk about grants. So why did they do that? It's always an interesting question. How do you get up here, right? Before I came here, I spent 34 years at the Indiana University School of Medicine. I was the director of a diabetes center there. It was unique in that we had no hard money. We were totally dependent upon grants, 100%, including my own salary, okay? And I kept it solvent for 34 years. And the way you do that is you write a boatload of grants. I mean, it's a continuous process. You know, we were pounding grants out, and we ended up in that 34 years bringing in approximately $55 million in grants. So we learned some things that are useful, and it was like a sink or swim model. It's like when they tell you to throw your kid in the pool and see if they can get out, you know. Well, that was sort of what we got into. So when I was asked to do this, First, I didn't bring any PowerPoint because I'm tired of PowerPoint. You know, I did give you an outline. I thought some things through. This is where I'm going to talk about, and there's some examples of things I'll get to. But I did review a ton of grants as well. I've been on study sections at the NIH for most of my career. I've chaired study sections for most of my career. So I'm going to share with you, and right now I'm actually chairing an ad hoc study section for the NIH, and I fly on Sunday to go back there for the meeting, okay? So I was thinking as we were going through all these grants, what are the things that are killing the grants? What are the things that are knocking people out? Because one truth is absolutely clear now. The good old days when I was coming up where you get 20–25% of the grants you're getting funded are gone. Those days are historical, and now we're talking funding lines between 7 to 5%, and they cut money off the top even if you get the grant, right? So it's become highly competitive. So the first points I wanted to come up with, so if you just take your outline, because I'm just going to tool right down this thing. First, funding is absolutely ruthless now and incredibly competitive. People like me, and there are a lot of people like me that are in soft money jobs all over the United States and major universities. We have to compete for the money, and it's ruthless. I mean, it's dog eat dog. And the moment you forget that, you think, oh, they'll give me a shot at this. They'll take a risk. Chances are they won't anymore. So be prepared for that. Second, the system of grants, particularly at the NIH, which is the major source of my funding, is incredibly biased. Right? There's a lot of stuff on. I'm a pacer, by the way. I would love to be pacing up and down this thing. They told me I have to stay here for the camera. So I'm like, trying to move. I can't?
Go this way, you can't do that.
Okay. Yeah, I tend to pace. It's my thing. And by the way, if you have anything you want to ask, questions, comments you want to share, a good story, I don't care what it is. I'd rather have you just fire it off at wherever. You don't have to raise your hand or anything. Just jump in, because it's a lot more interesting if we can make this interactive. That one actually for whatever time I have here. The biases in the system now are that, in fact, it's much easier to get funding if you have funding. They tend to cater to people that have had a history of grants. The joke is always, especially at the NIH, people who are senior, old guard folks and stuff, they tend to get points added to their score because they have a history. And if you don't have a history, you qualify for what we call an early stage investigator, which we'll talk about a little bit more, has some advantages, but also has disadvantages. So you have to know going in that you have a bias system, that the funding is going to be really hard to get. And my last one here is that the reviewers are an interesting breed of folk, right? How many people here have sat in review of a federal funding grant system? Anybody? You have. If you sit in these things, I make the analogy as like ballerinas with tusks, right? We all are really smart. We want to show everybody we're really smart, and we gore one another, and we have a proclivity to eating our own young. So everybody in there has this sort of feeling of like, well, I'm going to show you how smart I am. I'm at least as smart as you are, maybe smarter than you. You know what I mean? And that just goes on. So they start looking for little tiny things to chew on. And as soon as blood is let in the review, it's like piranha, right? Everybody jumps in. And it's somewhat an ego thing to me. Now, when I've chaired study sections, I spend probably half my time slapping people around to say, why are you going down that path? That's not what's important. Let's look at the science. That's what we're trying to do here. And let's consider risk. But risk-taking is a difficult thing. So if you have a grant that's brand new science and really unique, you have to frame it differently, because risk-taking is now more averse to the federal funding agencies. When you're only going to fund 7% of grants, that means 93% of the grants get turned back. And the method now is that the first 50% of the grants are only going to ever be discussed or scored in a competitive way, right? The other 50%, they turn them away. They basically are not discussed. They're just going to be given back comments to the reviewer, and that's it. So this is a different era. And for those of you that are new at this game, I don't envy you this epoch in time and space, right? But doesn't mean you can't be, you can't. We'll talk about that. So when you're going to think about a grant, I started going down the list of what would I tell you if you were my mentee. And the first thing would be, do you have a track record? Have you done about a grant where you can show any sense of skill, history, scientific integration, in that theme or that area that you want to approach, or is this something totally brand new to you? If it's totally brand new to you, you've escalated the level of risk, okay? Am I gonna gamble on you and you have never done this, you know? Versus somebody who's got 6 publications, 10 publications, 2 grants, a history, you know, you can sort of see what's starting to happen. You say, well, gosh, if this person's been there, better risk, you know what I mean? Better risk versus the plenty of money given. So there are ways, yes?
So is it all that you would put somebody on as a consultant who has a lot more experience with information?
Notice 4.A, which is the value of experienced co-investigators. So the way you compensate for this issue of like, you don't have a lot of track record, you want to convince them that you're not going to just spend the money and get nothing out of it. Because remember, the ultimate goal is to push science farther, okay? The ultimate goal is always to show that you're going to make a contribution to the science that does not yet exist, okay? If everybody's done it, you come and say, I want to do it too, they don't care. You know, you'll be in that bottom 50%. They'll say, well, yeah, that's good, but you need to come up with a new hypothesis or push the science a little farther. So yeah, oftentimes getting a co-investigator who does have that track record, who does have that experience, who does have the ability to demonstrate their skill that's relevant to the thing you're trying to study is a really good idea. Now, there's 2 ways that you can do that. One is by expertise. They represent a skill that you don't necessarily have to have, but they're really good. I was talking before about a session you had about missing data. And if missing data was going to be germane to your grant topic, but you don't know much about it, putting somebody on that does and highlighting who have this involvement, so if this issue comes up, you can deal with it. It's a really good plan. It's a good plan. And not trying to say, oh, I can do that. Don't, trust me, I can learn enough to handle that. They won't trust you. Ballerinas with this dance around you, and then they'll gore you if you're not looking, okay? So, it's true, trust me. The other way you can do that is what they call multidisciplinary grants, with each investigator responsible for different parts of the project. So if in fact, let's say you want to do a study and there is a therapeutic element, you want to do a group therapy session, and there's an analytic element, doing a new modeling technique and things, you may want to put investigators that represent those skill sets together as a group, okay? And then that way you're saying, well, gosh, you know, this is really difficult analysis, but they've got a really good biostatistician. Their beta has a long history of doing this kind of stuff. I don't worry about it anymore as a reviewer. You know what I mean? I don't have to worry about it. But if I don't see that when we're all out of our group discussions, you know, I like the idea of it, you know, the analysis is really difficult that. They don't have anybody that's skilled in it. You've done it. You know, your score is just going to start decreasing with blinding speed. Now, there is a issue here when you do multidisciplinary grants or you do high-power co-investigators. You've got to be careful that you're not putting them on your application simply because they're well-known. I get asked all the time, I'm pretty well-known in diabetes. People use my name, it's recognized in that field, right? But if you don't give me a job to do, all you're doing is you're putting me down for window dressing. You're putting me down for riding my coattails, and people will see that. They'll have you for it. They'll say, well, gosh, they got David Marrero. He's Mr. Diabetes Prevention. Well, what's he doing? And then they start looking at the budget justification statement. They start looking at my personal statement. And when you get people writing you personal statements on their bio sketches, make sure it actually pertains to the project. You know, it's really easy for guys like me to take one I've used before and just kind of change the names and dump it in. You know what I mean? And if somebody reads it carefully, there's no job here. There's nothing we're doing with this guy. Then it's actually a liability. Yeah. Letters of collaboration are one thing, but usually it's the biosketch.
Oh, it's biosketch.
So when you get the biosketch, there's a personal statement, right?
That should be tied to the actual grant.
Absolutely. And I can't tell you how many times I've read proposals where people just cut and pasted something and they put it in. There's no publications that are relevant. There's nothing. They used it from something else. They're busy. My personal advice to you, if you want a really good personal statement, write it yourself and send it to the person you're trying to get it from. Okay? You write it. And say, here's a model, please edit it, whatever. You will save time and you will save potential liability by them just saying, well, I'm going to use the one I used for this. And yeah, that project was really with African Americans. It had nothing to do with Latinos, but what the hell? Let's just do this. You know what I mean? And there are people who read. I did. If it doesn't line up, then I know you're gaming me. All of a sudden, my ballerina tusks come out. In a sticky one time in the group discussion.
Any thoughts about, the full multidisciplinary, we have multiple PIs, or one that's a PI with co-Is, or consultants? So like, I guess those are kind of the three possible flavors.
Sure there is. I think it all depends on what you have the person do. If sometimes it's based on budget. Okay? If you want me on your grant, I make a pretty good salary, I'll cost you. Okay? You make me a co-investigator, cuts into your budget, so you make me a consultant. You better define what you're going to have to do. If you're just saying, oh, we're going to use David Marrero because he's the guy who invented diabetes prevention, okay? Well, that's all fine and dandy, but if there's no job for me and somebody sees that, it's a waste of me and the money, and you get hammered for it, right? So consultants are like, be very specific what they're doing, and in the letter that they write for you, which you should write, unless you really trust people to write a great American letter, write the letter you want to have in your grant and let them edit it. If they don't like it, they won't sign it, right? But I guarantee you, 90% of people are happy as pigs in the slop, as we say in Indiana, actually slightly different term, but, to get that. So, take charge of that, because then you can craft exactly what you want the reviewer to see. This person's going to do the training, they're going to organize group sessions, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. For co-investigators at higher level status, which is good, I think that's good to do if you're a low experienced player. Again, you have to define what they do, and the two places to do that are going to be looked at is one is in the personal statement, and the other one is going to be in the budget justification. Now people think, oh, the budget justification. How do you guys run a grant budget justification and say, this makes no sense? No way can this person do this for this, this cost point. And then you start thinking, okay, they're gaming me. I'm being gamed as a reviewer. You don't want to game the reviewer. You want to take away any possible chance I have to nick you, because once blood's in the water, the rest of the ballerinas suddenly grow teeth, and they come after it. You know what I mean? And it's just the ego of the game. It's just how it is. It's stupid, but it's how it is. So I'm a big fan of being very clear about roles, about roles. In a multidisciplinary grant, you should be aligning people by skill set. So if you are a really good qualitative researcher and you really have experience with running focus groups, I want to highlight those points. This is why I brought these people here, because they have these skills. And you can say, I don't have them, but I know enough to know that I don't have them, so I'm going to go get them. Okay? Yeah?
And those people that
it's proportional to your own. Okay? So if I was going to write, I just did write a grant on diabetes prevention for Latino families at the border, okay? I have an extensive history of diabetes prevention, but I have far less with Latinos, far less. Now, I'm really well known, frankly, for diabetes prevention stuff. I created something, right? But that doesn't mean I know what to do with Latinos. And the first grant I wrote here, they came back to this guy doesn't know anything about culture. I mean, they just slapped me around. And I'm the guy that invented it. I'm the guy that created the National Diabetes Prevention Program. I'm the guy that got CMS to pay the benefit. Okay? Doesn't matter to them because we're talking about Latino. Oops. And so the next time, the revision, I went back and said, hey, I got somebody who's really good at this. They're going to work with me to craft this. I understand the science of it. I understand the evaluation of it. I even understand the training and the implementation. But I wasn't all that schooled about the cross-cultural nuances and cultural adaptation. In my world, it was all African Americans. Yeah.
Related to the track record, when I hear you say that, I think publications.
I know.
And maybe grants. But is that really what you're saying? When you look at somebody, you're like, oh, it's a co-investor, let's look at the track record.
Yeah. Pretty much you're looking at what they publish, you're looking at what they have in grant. You can also look at their application skill. So sometimes when I think about public health, I understand I was at a medical school for 34 years. Kind of sort of a different thing. Now when we talk about track record, I can argue for clinical skill. Like this person is an OBGYN, she knows how to do this. Okay, I'm not, so I got her. That's easy. In public health, it becomes more like, can you demonstrate in any way, shape, or form that you have done the management of chromatosis? Okay, or something, I'm not making this up, stand here, but you need to show me something that justifies the role you're gonna occupy. So yeah, publications are first, people like to see that, they're all academics and things like that. They like to see history of projects that are related, that's usually grants, or they want to see some kind of demonstration, maybe at a community level, that you have been working in this community for a long, long time. The other place where it comes in, I'll probably get to that at some point, is when you talk about the group. That's something that you can build, right? Not really get down to that. There is a value to low experience. That is, if you go in as what they call a ESI, early stage investing. Okay? The reason why ESI status is sort of cool is you go into a different review pool. You go into a different group of reviewers that are going to compensate for your lack of experience. They're told to allow you to not have as much experience. And they tend to be softer on some of the scoring elements. Okay? So being an early stage investigator actually can work to your benefit quite a bit. It does limit funding and the number of grants the investigator can hold. So you have to determine what is it, what qualifies you for that. The smartest thing to do there, which is I'll get to very shortly here, is talking to the project officer. People need to talk to project officers way more than they do. They're there for that reason, and they'll tell you, yeah, you qualify. And if you qualify for an ESI, usually a good idea. Later on, I'll tell you there's always a yin and a yang, right? I'll tell you what the yang is. Yeah.
So usually on the current application page, there's a place mark that. But do you recommend also doing that in abstract, because how do you address the wrong?
If you qualify, it's usually on the basis of time out of training, where you're at in your career trajectory, and that's defined by a number of years, and it's also defined by how many grants you actually hold. If I have 4 grants and I want to go into the ESI, they're going to say no. They're just going to say no, you're too schooled, you're out of here. You know what I mean? So that's why I like to talk to the project officer to make sure that, in fact, my particular configuration qualifies for this. But sometimes it doesn't. Yeah, but yeah, it's usually by time on task and how long you've been out in training. Let's go down to point 4, find the right RFA. The biggest mistake that rookies make is they decide that they have something that's really brilliant and wonderful, and they want to write the grant, but there's no place that wants to fund it. Okay? That happens all the time. All the time. Can't tell you how many grants I've read. Say, God, this is brilliant, but we weren't asked to do that. The RFA, the request for application, doesn't want to study that. So you got to find the right RFA, and I made some points here. Is what you want to propose a priority area for the agency? If it is great, then do you have a testable hypothesis? Okay, you got to find something that the agency says we're interested in HIV, and if you want to talk about, group dynamics and mental health, responding to a studies group that wants to really spend their money in HIV, you're wasting your time. And you can see that, right? It may be a brilliant grant saying, we really only have so much money, we're going to allocate this way. So, read the RFA. It'll tell you what they're interested in. Sometimes it's stuff that you can do, and sometimes it's stuff you can't do. And does it address an area in which you have expertise? If the RFA is thematically aligned with you, but you have no experience in that area, you're not going to climb uphill, right? You're going to have to really work that much harder to get funded because, in fact, while you may have an interest there, you don't have a skill. And the example I gave you with me trying to do a diabetes prevention grant with my ego saying, I'm just doing diabetes prevention there where I'm in the pool, and somebody's saying, yeah, but you're doing it with a totally different cohort, you don't know that much about them yet, is a fine example of that. You know what I mean? And this was an RFA that was about diabetes prevention. So if I came and said, I want to go to diabetes prevention, I did it to a thing that was looking for the treatment of type 1 diabetics who are youth. Oops, I'm not aligned. So look carefully at what the RFA says. They will tell you what they're interested in. Read that. Time well spent. Yeah.
On average, how many times do topics come around in the cycle? So like something like HIV, how many times are you requests for that?
There's no clear answer to that. It depends a lot on what funding is doing at the federal level. It depends on what interest is. I just came from a workshop provide. You couldn't get them from the chart, the clinician, or the partner or parent, okay? And it's really trendy and hot right now. And so we had a big workshop, and now we're writing what they call RFAs, requests for applications, right? It's a pretty cool thing to do if you get in on the game. But that just suddenly appeared. You know what I mean? A year ago, you couldn't have gotten that funding on a bet. Just, there's no interest. You know, what controls that? God, I wish I did. You know, if I did, I'd be a grant god, you know what I mean? But who knows, you know what I mean? Some things have recurring cycles, you know, they do. Some things are consistent themes, you know, but you have to pay attention to them, okay? You can't force your project, a square project, into that round. It's just, they'll let you submit it, but you've just burned 2 years of your life. And you get the thing written and then getting it back and deciding what you can do with it. I'm a fan of not wasting time, so don't really answer that. Wish I did. Do you have access to the right subject population? Now, this is a glorious and important issue because there was a time when NIH didn't care that much about it. And then so many grants got submitted that in fact what was happening is people would have these audacious recruitment goals. I'm going to recruit 1,500 people in the first year, and they couldn't do it. They just couldn't do it for all kinds of reasons. Some they knew, some they didn't, you know, things happen, right? They couldn't get it recruited. You know what the NIH does now? If you can't hit your stated recruitment goals in the first year, they stop your funding. 5-year grant, you're done. Oops, sorry. You said you were going to get 1,500 and you got 60, you know, or you got 300 or whatever, they will stop your funding. So one of the key things for successful grants is painting a picture that's believable, that shows you can recruit, that you can get the people you're interested in getting. Sometimes that's why you have a co-investigator. You find somebody that's just been doing this forever, you know, or you find somebody that's highly skilled and has a track record, and in their letter or their personal statement they say, I've recruited, you know, 10,000 people over 5 studies in the last 6 years, something like that. You know what I mean? You have to be able to demonstrate that you can in fact recruit. And I can't tell you how many grants I've seen that have been crushed by that, crushed. And that's a new rule. That only happened in the last 5 years, where they now just say, unless you get it, we're not going to keep spending money. And the reason for that was that studies are powered to a certain sample size, right? If you couldn't get it and you spent 5 years of funding and you never got to a sample size that can answer the question with statistical precision, what did we invest in? You know, I mean, we have nothing. You know, we have nothing. Good intention. And good intention is your worst enemy in grant writing. It has to be demonstrable. You have to convince me that you can do it. So pay attention to that. If you don't have a history of recruiting people that you are interested in, by God, you better get it. I just saw a grant in the study section I'm in that's looking at Native Americans, right? And they had no discussion about their relationship with tribal politics. They just said, we have a lot of Indians here, we're going to recruit a bunch of them. Well, in the discussion we had on the telephone, somebody said, you know, I've done stuff with Native Americans, and unless you get this approved by the tribal systems, it doesn't happen. And many of you probably have that experience or know about that, right? That's sort of how it is. That grant got shot down right there. It was a really well done project. It was really clever and smart. Probably would have changed science a little bit. But they couldn't mount any argument that says we have the relationship intact, we have this in force, and we will be able to accomplish this. So be careful on that dimension. Finally, do you have the right team? You know, talk about that. You have to make sure you have all the right players you can represent skill set. The final statement here, number E, is can you create a compelling, significant statement? Grants changed about, I don't know, 12, 15 years ago. We used to be able to write 25-page applications. Then they cut it down to 12. Then they cut it into let's have a significant innovation and approach section. Okay? The significance section has become so important because that is the test of does anybody care. Okay? And if you're in a study group where the RFA doesn't care, it didn't really care about your area, or you don't make an argument for why what you're going to do is so important to the broader public health and the broader level of science, it's done. It doesn't matter how good the methods are, because nobody cares. You know, it's not significant, right? So selling significance is really critical to you. We'll talk a little bit more about specifics that you can do in that. But but you have to make an argument for why your science is important to the general science, okay, to the bigger world. If you don't do that, you know, I've gotten this far down, I got 9, 10 grants to read, yours sucks because your significance is non-existent. I don't even have to read the rest of it, you know what I mean? Or I'll skim it, you know, so, okay, this one's done. I'm gonna triage it. I'm gonna put it to the lower 50%, and it will not be discussed. And you'll wait for written comments, which will take 6 weeks to get. Read your RFA carefully. They send these big RFAs out, and they tell you a bunch of stuff. They tell you what they're interested in. They tell you why they think the science is significant. They tell you what they really want to see from you, and they give you a bunch of rules, and people don't pay attention to the rules. Does anybody know what the standard NIH font is? Yeah, 11-point Arial. If you want to use Comic Sans because you like the way it looks, and somebody who's insanely anal, you know, a ballerina with teeth and tusks, right? What's that? Says, well, Jesus, this is Comic Sans, and they used 0.4 margins instead of 0.5, and it's down to 10.5 thing. You pissed off the reviewer and the project officer. And the biggest mistake we all make is we piss off the reviewers. We get cranky. And once they get an attitude, then as they're reading with an attitude. It's like fights you've had with your significant other, and you get into an issue, and now no matter what's said, you're filtering it through that anger, you know? That's how reviewers are. So you piss them off by not following the small rules, you suddenly are going way down the scale. So unless you're Hemingway, and you write these brilliantly, breathtakingly clear, concise sentences and stuff, you're swimming straight, you know, and you're going against the current. So read the RFA, and I can't tell how many people don't do that. Yeah.
When I was training in restaurants and they used to say, and this is back in the old days, we actually send the paper copies.
Yeah.
And everything had to be exactly like collated and organized in exactly the right way. They would say that the program officer, what it needs to do is take it and we get on the review.
Oh, yeah.
And we measure it to see that it was no more than the right amount of font we put in the solution.
Yeah. And you know, there are people that's their job. That's what they live for, right? And there's a unique breed of people. I think they're bred someplace in Ohio. You know, that's what they do, and they take it really seriously. You know, I think back when I wrote my dissertation, this is how old I am, we didn't have personal computers, you could type it. And when you typed it, there was a piece of paper they gave you, onion skin, and it had a light blue line around what was the borders. And if you had a character over that blue line, a reader went through your thing to look for this, would hand it back to you and correct it. Well, guess what? With typing, if you have something move a character over, the entire thing changes for the next, and these are 200-300-page documents. So there were people that spent their careers typing dissertations. That was a job. And it was $1 a page. This is back in the 70s, 60s, and $70. Real money, you know, $200-300 for a freaking dissertation. One of the things I see, it's funny you say this, because I see it all the time, is I'll be looking at a document that I got, and we get them as PDFs, right? We get PDFs. Now, sometimes we get live documents if we want to edit them, we can convert them. But people don't pay attention to what they're doing with their development. You know what I mean? You were cutting and pasting, moving stuff, and all of a sudden you have a gap here, and you got a sentence that stops mid-word, and all these crazy things. Well, when I'm a reviewer, I get pissed at that. That's sloppy. And if you're sloppy, guess what I think about you? I'm thinking, God, I mean, six grammatical errors and some sloppy text junction stuff. I'm thinking, do I trust this person to do this complex and really delicate operation in the real world with people that can be impacted by it? No, I really don't anymore. You'll have to convince me. I'll give you the chance, but I'm filtering you now through my anger. You know what I mean? I'm now pissy. If I'm pissy, you're not going to have a good time as a reviewer. You know what I mean? You're not going to like it.
Here's sort of a random question that ties the two. So as you said, the RFAs will tell you why they think the science is important or significant. It's hard not to find yourself then using their words back.
Oh, yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Or like, is that desirable or undesirable?
Yeah, it's funny you said that. And if you quote me on this, I'll call you a liar to your face, okay? But I'm a big fan of splitting the language back to the RFA, from the RFA into my application. If that's what they want to see, I want to tell them that I'm doing
That's what I'm doing it, yeah.
That's what I'm doing. And I'll use their language. I'll
But
use their
sometimes they've got
terminology.
really good language for it.
Absolutely. Now, you know, if you're going to cut and paste it like a quote, you better put quote marks around it or paraphrase it. Okay? Paraphrasing is fair game, you know, but do that. It's really smart because, again, that's what they want to see. Now, remember what happens to the review process. I get a bunch of grants, I go through them, and I start scoring them, right? And the score goes from 1, which is like breathtaking, down to 5, which is, or actually 7, which is here's a quarter, call your parents and tell them you're not going to be an investigator, right? So, I mean, you have this range, but then we discuss them. We go back and forth in a group environment, and we discuss what my impression was, what your impression was, and what your impression was. And in that discussion is where, you know, things rise or fall. If you get somebody that hated your grant and they're the primary reviewer, they can sway the other reviewers who loved it to say, well, you got to adjust your score. And so your score, you had a 1, a 2, and a 7, okay? And so the 7 can make everybody else come up to 3s and 4s, you know what I mean, just to balance out the equation. And they'll argue passionately for the reason why in that discussion section. So the less you give them, and things like sloppiness, not being responsive to the RFA, not having the right expertise, the inability to recruit people in a convincing way, that's all it takes why one person said this is a 7, and the others looked past that and said, but it's a brilliant concept. It's brilliant science. It's an innovation that we haven't seen. Well, those days are harder. Yeah.
Related to the RFA, now the agency that creates that RFA, how much are the reviewers constantly looking back at the RFA? Are they briefed on the RFA? Like, how involved are the reviewers in actually connecting the proposal to, like,
That varies a lot by reviewer. You know, more experienced reviewers are pretty careful to make sure what the RFA was asking for, to see whether you're responsive, you know. Less experienced reviewers don't pay as much attention. They go more for methods or something like that. You are briefed about it by the chair of the study section. So when I'm chair, my job is to tell you this is what we're trying to do here. This is what we're focusing on. This is what should be important, you know. But that is so variable, as you can imagine. You know, you get a great review group, you get great response back. Even if you don't get it, you'll know how to fix it, right? If you get crappy review groups, they just crush you and that's it, you know what I mean? And they move on to the next thing. So that's sort of a turkey shoot, as we say in Indiana. You know, you hope they show up with the right gun, but if they don't, you know, there it goes. Let's talk about money. There's 2 ways you could do this. Has anybody here written modular grants yet? Do you know what that is? No, a modular budget. We're talking a budget now. A modular budget is where you get $250,000 a year, and you don't need to write extensive justifications, which can be a real benefit or sometimes a hindrance, depends on how you look at it. But you can only, you're capped at that 250. So you're going to put in a budget that has like personnel and equipment and supplies, but you don't have to explain it away very much because it's modular. It's just, this is it, you plug and play. Versus an itemized budget, which is what bigger grants are, where yes, you do have to explain it away. You have to defend why you're spending the money on you. Or why do I want your piece of technology or this equipment or something like that? I have to have this. You have to defend it. And there's always a reviewer in every review group that's a budget freak, that they read the budgets carefully. Now, I am a budget freak. I'm known for this. Other people don't even pay any attention to it. If it doesn't go over the limit, they don't care. You know what I mean? We're talking about the science. All they care about is this, or they care about that. I want to see what you're spending the money on because sometimes it's BS. And if I see BS, it's like the old joke about don't piss on my boots and try to tell me it's rain. You know, you've got to get past that with the reviewer. And there's always a reviewer that will look at the budget and say, well, you know, they're asking for, they got 14 co-investigators here. Little tiny percentages and stuff, and maybe I think they're coattailing it. I think they're just putting these names on so they have. There's no job here. In the justification, there's no explanation what this person's going to do. You're done right there. You know, someone say, okay, this is a bogus grant trying to use names instead of assignments. So don't go down that. There's been argument. I was looking into this before I came here. Given that budgets are now being trimmed, okay, this is very standard. I get a grant award. the NIH comes back and says, okay, Dave, we're going to take 15, 17% off the top. They don't tell me where they take it. It's my problem. So it's like, which child do you want to kill? You know what I mean? What are you going to do here? So in those situations, modular doesn't help you all that much because they still trim, but now you're capped at 250. My argument would be you might as well go for an itemized budget at a bigger budget line. You know what I mean? And defend it. And then it's easier sometimes to get away with that. I've been asked about R01s versus R21s because R21s, which are planning feasibility grants, are recommended oftentimes for early stage investigators, and they are usually seen as a good way to collect pilot data. Bigger grants usually want to see pilot data. They want to see some evidence that you've got something going on there. It turns out that R21s, so I'm going to make the argument that as early stage investigators, you might think about just going right for an R01. Okay? A little bold suggestion, but R01s have a higher rate of funding, more money involved, and if you can convince them about experience, be it in data or applied experience, you're equally likely to get it as an early stage investigator because you get some points because you're an early stage investigator. So as you think about this, overall, they only funded 15% of the R21s in the last cycle at NIH. 15%. They did a higher percentage of R01s. Okay, even though the number per study section is still smaller. Does that make sense? In other words, we're still only funding 7%, but there's more of them going out. So think that one through, talk to your advisor about it. On point 9 here, boy, I realize I'm going to run out of time. I'm just starting to have fun. So I'm going to jump a little bit here. Look over what it says about talking to the project program officer. These people could be your bestest friend. They can help you a ton. They can give you guidance. They can tell you that what you're doing is or is not likely to be well received. Really make that call, okay? And frequently what I will do is I will prepare a specific aims page and say, would you like to see this? And if they come back and say, you're going to have a problem here, a problem there, I would pay attention to at the time. I gave some very specific points. I always do this before I start writing the grant. Don't write your whole grant and say, I gotta call the project officer. You might have killed it, 6 months or a year at a time. So, do that, talk to this person. Their job is to get the best group of applications into the pool that they can. So they're motivated, okay? So I want to get into the grant product, the actual grant. Let's go to point 10 here, second page, or X. The grant product. First, do not assume that reviewers know anything about your field, okay? One of the grants that I wrote when I first came here to Arizona, I talked about the diabetes prevention program. Who here knows what that is? Anybody? Okay, one person, okay? This was a diabetes-specific RFA. I assumed that everybody would know the DPP because it's one of the largest and most expensive clinical trials done in the history of the NIH. Legendary study. Showed that we could prevent type 2 diabetes. Huge study. I assumed that the reviewers would know that. Guess what? I got the review group where nobody really knew that. And so the assumption that they would know that, and that thus I don't have to explain things away, killed it. And they said, well, why does this person think that this intervention will work? It's worked with 80,000 people. Okay? It's been shown to work. It's fait accompli. And they didn't know it. Oops. So be careful about assuming that I know your field, or I know your field, or I know your terminology. If you're not 100% sure that it's absolutely common knowledge in the world, you have to explain it away. And that's a mistake a lot of people make. I think you should look at the NIH Reporter. That's a system that lets you search what grants are out there, what's been funded. Find out what people are doing. Find out what people are into, because that's going to help you to frame your argument. You know what I mean? Or you'll learn that nobody's anything like you are. Then talking to your project officer about, well, I'm into a whole new sort of thing here, is probably a really good move, right? You'll figure out whether the field is ready for you or not. You see that in technology a lot. People build these new technology and they think it's the greatest thing since baked bread. And people say, I don't get this. This doesn't look like anything I'm aware of, and they have a hard time with it. The directions for the funding opportunity announcements are really important. That's the thing that tells you what sections you have to have. If you decide you're going to rename the sections or do your own and interesting, innovative outline format and stuff, that's not going to play well because they have a certain way they want it to look.
They want certain sections in certain places. They expect you to have a facilities section that describes the environment you're in, that kind of stuff. If you leave any of that stuff out, you get points chopped off just immediately, okay? So pay attention to what they ask you to produce, in the way that they want to see it. And then I put here revise, revise, revise. Too many people write a grant and they do it 1 or 2 times and they think they got it. And chances are that you don't. Make sure you send it out to colleagues that you trust and get their feedback and see what people have to say. Because oftentimes you'll see something, or they'll see something that really makes a big difference. My average number of revisions on a grant is around 20. I know it sounds insanely compulsive, but every time I go through it, it gets tighter, it gets better, it gets sharper, Or I see something, oh Jesus, I said this here, but down here I said this, and they're not consistent, things like that. So be careful with that. Now let's talk about the sections. Mostly within NIH you get 12 pages, plus a specific aims page. And a specific aims page is just that, a page. It's not 2 pages, it's not a page and 4 extra sentences, it's 1 page. I have seen reviewers take that first page, read it, and not read what was following, okay? You've got to get it down to a page. And if you're like me and you love language and you think this is the most beautiful thing you've ever written and you're crying softly when you're done with it, but it's a page and a half, you better make it a page, okay? Be careful about that. Now, the specific aims is your core idea and it's the plan for solving the problem. Do not make each aim depend on the other. Each one should be achievable regardless of the others. So if your aims are, first I'm going to get all this information, and then based on this information, I'm going to build this, okay? What happens if you don't get all that information? Your second aim is dead, right? You can't do it because you said, I have to have this done. And what if your third aim is based on the second aim being completed? Be very careful about that. That's a nasty trap to get into. Yeah.
I've always wondered, brother, when you look at your test of the mediation model, and like aim 1 maybe you're interested in the first half of mediation, whereas the second or the third aim is interested in testing the entire model and, thinking a little bit more nuanced about it or just moderate. Is that what you consider dependent?
It could be. So I'd have to know more about what that first aim, how it would be done, and what happens if you didn't get the information you thought you were going to get.
Well, and mediation is based on like whether or not the first half is significant. So, because how you describe it was whether or not you did aim 1, so that I guess that would fall.
Yeah. If aim 1 fell apart, does aim 2 or 3 make any sense?
So you didn't find what you were hypothesizing.
Right. Yeah. And that's a rookie mistake. It's done all the time. People sort of link one aim to the next to the next. So I have to know this before I can do this. And if I do this, then I should be able to do that. And the easy kill for that is like, well, if you don't get that first one done, does that mean the rest of it's irrelevant? You can't do it. If the answer to that is yes, and even if what you're describing to me, you could probably defend it, you better defend it. You better explain it to me. We're going to do this, and we know that we'll get this outcome. And based on that outcome, then we can build the second component, okay? But you know you can get it. You have to know you can get it. You got to tell me and make me believe that you can get it. Because I've seen so many grants go down on that. Because the first aim is this huge data collection process, and I don't even know yet whether you can actually pull it off. So it's a little less of a problem when you're using extant data sets. I'm going to get the national in-Haines data, national health data. Right. Based on that, we're going to look for these things, and if we see these, we're going to do this. But if we don't see them, we're going to do that. But I mean, you want something like that, because otherwise people will crush it. No, the number of aims doesn't really matter. Although a frequent comment I hear in review sections is it's really ambitious. So a thing that can hurt you is if someone says, boy, this was great. And people doing everything depends on your track record, your history, and your team. So if you can convince me of it, knock yourself out. But if I see 6 aims or something, I think, oh Jesus, come on, you can condense this into 4 and probably do it in 3. You know what I mean? You need to be very careful about that. Significance. Now let's talk about this. I told you earlier this is important. This is XE.2. You have to sell this. You get 1 to 2 pages to do it. if you make your whole grant significance write-up like a term paper, you know, while it might be beautifully written and stuff, you're losing time for your approach. And so you gotta eliminate that problem. So think 1 to 2 pages. And you need to explain the importance of the problem or the critical barrier to progress in the field that the proposed project addresses. That's the most important point for elimination. You have to explain to me why this is important and the rest of the world. If you can't do that, it's just another example of something that's been done 6 times across the middle. Let's say it's a mediation thing. People done a gazillion mediation study. Why is yours stuck on the board? Unless you make that very clear, very quickly, I no longer care. You know, it's like, okay, you know, I'll listen, but I'm not going to pay much attention. You need to explain how the proposed project will improve scientific knowledge, technical capability, and/or clinical practice in 1 or more broad fields. If I get this answer, I'll be able to resolve rate trials. Something that's going to happen, it's not happening now. That gets you much higher up than just saying, I'm going to do something that's been done. I'm doing it slightly differently, but it's been done. Okay? So you've got to sell that. It's really important. You need to describe how the concepts, methods, technology, treatment, services, or preventive intervention that drive the field will be changed, underlying change, if the proposed aims are achieved. You've got to explain it. Let me just summarize. Significance means you're going to tell me how the field that you're in is going to be improved, enhanced, or furthered in ways that aren't currently the case. Now, I'll give you an example of a grant that I just submitted and where I did that. I'm talking about diabetes prevention, right? Diabetes prevention grant. And I want to do it with Latinos, and Latinos are pretty trendy and hot stuff right now in the grant. It's all good. The problem that I realized is that getting people engaged in lifestyle change is really difficult. And as a consequence, recruiting them into studies like this is extremely difficult. And nobody's doing well with recruitment. It's a huge barrier. And grants are getting turned back right and left because nobody believes they can pull them off. So what did I come up with? This is my significance. I'm using a model, a community model, going after a population that shows up every month, minimally, sometimes every 2 weeks, reliably, and I can interact with them on site. So I have a captive audience, and I have 190,000 of them in South Tucson. Okay? Wow, think about that. It's not that the prevention's interesting, it's that I've got a model that's going to be able to say, I can now engage them because they're there. I don't have to recruit them, I don't have to bring them in, I don't have to sell them. They're there, and they're going to come back regardless of whether I'm there or not. It's the food bank. The Tucson Community Food Bank. Food scarcity is part of it, right? And the problem is getting people to show up. Come join my group. You know, be educated. I don't want to do that. But if you're waiting an hour every time at the food bank, and you're showing up because you need the food, I have a much higher probability of getting you engaged, right? And so, lo and behold, that's significant. Following, it's not that we're doing prevention's been around for a long time, and it's highly needed in the Latino community. Getting them to play is one of the significant barriers. So I represented my significance section. I got a way to do this that enhances my ability to recruit and engage people in this activity. And I know that they'll keep coming back. I know. I piloted that. But anyway, just an example. Well, on the next page here, I should show you what I call the 4-paragraph model. And this is something I've seen recently and I've heard presented in the study group I was in. You have examples of it in the handout I gave you where this person showed a 4-paragraph significance section. Kind of like how they did this, so I thought it was cool. And the example I think is we call it an HIV one, I think, but it's short and concise. This is what this said. I like it. First paragraph, introduce the problem you plan to solve, cite relevant literature, and avoid dated stuff into a focus point. So it's give you the background. Why is it important that we do this? You know what I mean? There's a huge amount. I use diabetes. Why is it important that we do diabetes prevention? There are 85 million people in the United States that have prediabetes, which is a metabolic defect that suggests they will convert to type 2 diabetes. Last year, that cost the United States, folks with diabetes, $370 billion annually. Okay? And unless we stop this epidemic,
we're going to have an overwhelming fiscal impact. Okay? That sort of makes the point. Why is this important? Because the numbers are so freaking huge, right? That's devastating. Second paragraph, touch on the most important points supporting the introduction, providing additional background and data needed. So what am I going to do? I have a chance to do diabetes prevention, but because engaging people is difficult, has proven to be problematic, in science, I'm using a model where, in fact, I have a captive audience that is very large, highly at risk, and it gives me a better shot at getting control. Third paragraph. Describe the approach you will use that will overcome any difficult challenges and state how you will meet this goal via specific objectives or aims. Okay? All this is in your significance. Why is it important that I'm doing it this way? Okay? Why is this way good? And then the fourth paragraph, drive home the project's significance in a broader context, possibly explain how others can apply your research to the field or related research. And in that little example I gave you, it looks like this. Here's 4 paragraphs that really pretty much explain why this is important. Now, it could be longer, it could be 2 pages, but don't get into a big review thing. David by Smith and et al. Showed this, and Dr. Smith showed that, and this and that, and this and that, and this and that. People go into that, and they call those term papers in the review group all the time. The term paper. And then they lose the point, You want to hammer the point shut. Why is this important? What's the impact of this? How's it going to address public health? How is what you're going to do improve it and make it different? Contribute to the science. If we do your mediation study, what does mediation science get? Okay. So I think that that's really, really important, and spend some time thinking about your significance statement. Yeah. I think it depends a little bit on the scale. A public health impact to me, and I'm new to public health, guys, you schooling me here, but in my framing, it depends on sort of overall societal impact. You know what I mean? So if I use diabetes, which I know the best, it's the leading cause of blindness, it's the leading cause of lower extremity amputations, it's the leading cause of cardiovascular disease. More people died from diabetes last year than breast cancer and HIV combined. Okay? So there's no denying that this is a gigantic scale. It cost $374 billion last year, and we have only 30 million people in this country with diabetes, but another 90 million behind them who are at high risk for the pre-diabetes. Okay? That's 3 sentences. I sort of made the point that this is gigantic impact. But if what you were talking about was smaller or specific to a group that's not commonly known, so to speak, that's a harder sell to me. You know what I mean? That's why the RFA, going back to the RFA will tell you whether they're interested in a public health concern that is more narrowly defined versus one that has a much broader scale. That answer? Let's talk about innovation. There's some examples in that handout of innovation. This is where you need to explain how your application challenges and seeks to shift current research or clinical practice paradigms. People forget that innovation. What are you doing that nobody's done before, or by doing this, the science can evolve? And that's going to be tricky, but you've got to make that argument. That's what's innovative.
But like your example, new way of recruiting, that was mentioned in significance or no? And that is part of your innovation. Like the innovation is that I am testing a model with this new way of recruiting.
Yeah, that's.
Isn't that in both?
I sometimes do put them in both. If I think it's really persuasive, then yes. Now I'll give you an example of that. With the diabetes prevention program, gigantic clinical trial, 27 centers, $190 million grant. Gigantic, big stuff. When that was when that showed conclusively we could prevent the onset of type 2 diabetes, the next question became, how do you scale it to public health, right? Well, my center came up with a model using the YMCA as a model for doing this. So what was the significance? The significance was there's this huge group of people that are in the wings that convert, and we need to interfere with that, right? And we have a way to do this at scale. The innovation then became, this is how we're going to scale. Okay? We're going to use a common community agency of which 55% of the United States population is within a 5-minute drive of the facility. You know, you start doing that kind of stuff. So like, not only are we doing something that's important and significant, but we're doing it in an interesting way. Sometimes I'll allude to both in both sections. You know, if I do more detail when I'm in the innovation. This is why this has not been done before. Nobody at that point, nobody had ever tried to take it to the public health. You know, and so we did. You know, and it's like, wow, that was seen as very innovative. People like it. You want to describe any novel theoretical concepts, approaches, or methodologies, instrumentation, or interventions to be developed or used, and any advantage over existing methodologies, instrumentation, or interventions. This is where you see people saying, you know, historically people have done it this way, and here's the limitation to that. As well, it's okay. It's, you know, we still have these questions that are not answered. Our ways to address that. You know, our way is better. Our way is more interesting. Our way is going to give us more data. It's going to have more applications. It's going to have more this, more that. You need to sell me on that. In other words, if you're doing what everybody else has done, and it's just the theme is different, it's not innovative. And you'll get reviewers who will say that. This isn't really innovative. This has been done. In the most recent grants I've written about diabetes prevention, and I'm the guy that developed the YMCA model, I'm it, right? It's no longer seen as innovative. Nobody cares anymore that I go to a community center in their apartment. You know, big deal. You've done that 9 times. You know what I mean? So it's a different population. Who cares? You know, it's not innovative. You're just applying it differently. I've been over it. Finally, explain it. Yeah.
So, in that section, is it better to focus on maybe one or two specific areas, rather than maybe many, or do you want to
That's a great question. I don't have an immediate answer, but my gut says pick the big ticket item. You know, the thing that's really, you know, you don't know anybody who's done it quite like you're doing it. You know what I mean? And why is the way you're doing it important? You know, what do I get for doing that? That's sort of the core of the innovation to me. And I think the examples I gave out in the innovation piece that I gave you are sort of good examples of that. They don't take a long time to do it. So if you try to give me every possible innovation, you know, the question becomes, is there anything like that out there already? Because if there is, somebody will say, you know, and when you get the response back, you get strengths and weaknesses. That's what they say. And in the weakness, they'll say, well, they talk about this, but that's already been done in other exams. You know what I mean? And they don't see that as a strength, they see it as a weakness. It's not a damning one, but it's not going to help, you know. I want to move to approach because I'm going much slower than I thought I was going to go, because that's really where the rubber meets the road. All right, approach. You get, it's innovation, 2 pages, 2.5. You can also use innovation to describe literature variants. You know what I mean? If the literature says this, but if we do this, we can do this. You know what I mean? And sometimes I see literature introduced helps make the argument, but also go into significance as we go into innovation. So it has to be linked to your approach. You know what I mean? Everybody says this way, but we said this way. We're going to try it this way because if we do this way, it works, we'll get this. Okay? Approach is the big chunk. This is the method, the 4 to 6 page piece. Here you're going to describe your overall strategy, methodology, and analysis to be used to accomplish the specific aims of the project. And many people by approach will do it by aim. Aim 1, this is how we're going to do it. Aim 2, this is how we're going to do it. Linking that is oftentimes a good idea. So I understand. Because a problem sometimes that happens is when you're writing up the method that you don't refer back to the aim, it gets confused. What's doing what here? You know what I mean? I don't know. So sometimes I think linking that's smart. You want to include how the data will be collected, analyzed, and interpreted, as well as any resource sharing plan. I can't emphasize that second point enough. You've got to convince me you
get into the data, you know what to do with the data, and you can count. Okay? You can't do that, you're done. You want to discuss potential problems, alternative strategies, and benchmarks for success anticipated to achieve the aims. People oftentimes don't put in limitation sections, and there are always limitations. You would rather have me as a reviewer understand that you understand them, that you thought about them, versus to think I'm naive, I don't know the difference. If I think this person, you know, this guy right here has never told me the limitations, and there's a bunch, but he never even remotely mentions them, or how they'll compensate for them, I think you're an idiot. You know what I mean? You don't know enough, you're not experienced enough. You know, so you don't know the difference. You gotta come back and do this. I'll write back something like, you really need a biostatistician in your team. You know, because I think there's the problem. You have to understand the analysis and how, what happens if you can't get this data this way. So yeah, taking some time in that area is really important. And this group of things, 1 through 5 in our approach, are things that I've been seeing grants get data on. You know, they're not addressed. The discussion starts to turn south on it. If the project is in the early stages of development, describe any strategy to establish feasibility and address the management of any high-risk aspects of the proposed work. Some studies, there is no background. You know, you're charting new water, but you better describe some of these elements, what's going to happen if this happens, how are you going to do it if that happens, and to sort of talk about high-risk management. I saw a study not so long ago, I reviewed it, and the study was with the counseling model. And the counseling model had a fairly high risk for causing really serious distress for the people who were getting exposed to it. Okay? And they talk about that. And everybody in the review was, Jesus, can you imagine if you heard this information and nobody talked to you about it? And everybody focused on the, oh my God, that was such a traumatic thing. Well, if you thought about it a little further, if you read a little deeper into the way, you realize they were dealing with it. They didn't talk about it. And it killed them. It killed them. Yeah, yeah. You know, we realize that this approach has a possibility of causing extreme distress to these individuals. In the event that this happens, this is how we're going to manage that problem. You know, we'll refer to it. Whatever, you know what I mean? But they did describe, and that becomes, if it's not there, and somebody that reviews says, you know, I was thinking about this, and this would be terrible. This would be terrible. What happens if you don't? You know what I mean? You know, and you know, you just think, well, that person doesn't get it, or they don't think about that. That's risky. Particularly if what you're doing is high risk. That's a risk. Okay? If there are multiple specific aims that you may address significance, innovation, and approach for each specific aim. Individually, or you can address them as a group. I don't know what to tell you about that. I mean, I've seen it done both ways, and both ways have been successful. Okay? So sometimes, in your example about that you were talking about the educational interview, the mediation, it may be that each specific aim has its own unique significance and innovation, and that might be a way to circumvent the issue about you have to first do the first one to get to the second. You know what I mean? So you have to think that through, but I've seen it done both ways. If you can put in preliminary studies, this is the chance to demonstrate how productive you or your team is and make sure the preliminary studies are relevant to your proposal. I've seen people who say, look at what I've done, this is my research. It has nothing to do with the proposal. It's home research, you know? And gee, I had a publication. Well, so what? You know what I mean? It's not relevant to what you're doing. Don't do that. If you have something to say, I did this and based on this, it led me to these conclusions, which we're going to study here. That's cool. Because now I think, wow, this person's thinking about it. They're in, right? So don't just brag about yourself and brag about yourself. Link it back to your specific aims. If you do that, you're in good shape. If you don't, you get an Always interpret your data. Provide an explanation of what it means to your proposal. If you put in a preliminary study, you need to, it's the same point I'm making in a different way. You need to explain to me why the data you saw is relevant to what you're doing. And if you can't do that, reviewers will think you don't know how to use data. You know, you can analyze the outcome, but you can't grow it. You can't make it the foundation for the next thing. And that can be a problem. So I've seen a lot of it, and the people that are very statistical in their thinking get really pissy about that kind of stuff. So you know how to do data take part of it. In terms of research strategy, now this is a whole big long list of stuff. And I see that I'm going to be running out of time here pretty shortly, so I'm going to sort of abbreviate this a little bit. Read the piece that says research strategy and design and method. Those are sort of basic structural things we like to see, but I want to talk about general elements, okay? First, you need to tell me an overview of your study. I need to see an overview. Why is that important? When I'm writing the summary statements back, I frequently take from that overview. Because I have to write a bunch of stuff back to you, and I make it up sometimes out of my head, sometimes I pare it back that you give me. So the overview actually has value. You know what I mean? It's sort of a funny place. And the overview is positive and it's sort of productive, and I'm stealing from it to write my review. That helps you. I mean, it actually puts my mind into a different place.
Wait, is that a certain section, or you're saying you have your own section?
I think under when you get to research approach, I usually have an overview paragraph, a short one that says, this is what we're going to do. Now, I'm giving you guidance as to where we're going to go with it, okay? Then I'm going to put in different things. Now, these are the ones that I picked after overview. There's 2, 3, 4, 5, data collection, quality assurance, quality control, project administration. These are things that I've seen that when people put them in, people love it because they see you as a person who's really thinking about the application you bring. I mean, and it's a lot of stuff, but it can be done in a sentence or two most of the time. So, for example, population selection. What's the sampling frame? What's the exposure assessment? What's the disease assessment? I think in medical terms, usually. Inclusion and exclusion criteria, okay? Those things, if you give me that back, that you're thinking through your view, I'm going to get 1,500 Latinos. What's that tell you? I'm going to get 1,500 Latinos. But if I said, my sampling is I have 180,000 Latinos at this place, and I need to get this many out of it. That's much more believable than just getting 1,500 Latinos. If I take it from 180,000, it's more easy. You know what I mean? I told you that. You don't have to, how many use that exposure? Okay? And that's what exposure assessment is. How many people do you think have your condition? How many people do you think are available to you to study? You don't tell me that. I have to make it up in my head, and I will almost always make it up negatively. You don't have enough. How can you possibly get 1,500 people doing, what's your population? Now, if you're talking about Latinos in Tucson, you're talking about rock, right? And so you have a good argument to make. But in places, if I was going to talk about Latinos in Indianapolis, Indiana, there's 250,000 in the city. You didn't know that, did you? If I tell you I'm going to get 1,500 Latinos in Indianapolis, you don't think Indianapolis is the place where we're going to see them. You suddenly are interpreting like, this guy's dreaming. If I tell you, oh, by the way, here's whatever, and this is how I'm going to get to it. Okay? You want to talk about your data collection. How are you going to do the data collection? Many times we're going to do baseline, 3-month, 6-month, and 12-month assessment. Okay, how are you going to do that? You're going to bring them somewhere, you're going to go out in the field and do that, you're going to ask them to make appointments at the hospital. If you tell me that stuff, I'll mention it. As the reviewer, I won't make it up in your favor. I'll make it up that you're an idiot, and you don't know how to do this, and you don't have experience, unless you show me that. You need to tell me, how are you going to do it? What do you expect to see? What do you think you're going to get? What are the outcomes you expect, right? What are the confounders? What are the things you think may, in fact, interfere with the data, and how you deal with those analytically? What are the eco-variables? Can you standardize the protocol? Are you going to train people to do this? We're going to use trained research associates to collect the data. Okay, I see that a zillion times. Versus, we're going to do a 4-day data collection training. We're going to have 8 people selected from the target communities be taught specifically how to do height and weight, specifically how to use the stadiometers and the equipment that we need to do, how to interpret the data, how to read for people who are illiterate, the questionnaires that we're trying to do, that type of discussion. That's a 2-sentence explanation, but it's a detail level that shows sophistication. I think, wow, this person's sort of on top of it. You don't have to explain the trainer. Hey, we're going to do that. Just the fact you see you can do that is different than we're going to use train people and say, okay, I can train them. What's going on there? Where did they come from? Don't get it.
Quality assurance and quality control, you rarely see this in grants anymore, and every time I've seen it in a grant or I've seen it reviewed in a study section, it gets extra points. That's where you're talking about training people to do things. You're doing supervising and PI checks. Are you going to be out in the field checking on your data collectors? You should be. Even if you only say it. We're going to use trained people. We have a 3-day training protocol on how to collect this information. They're going to be trained in interview techniques to ensure that we have a high quality thing and can deal with discomfort or anxiety issues that might arise from the data. We're going to make sure that, in fact, we're going to do some spot checking and do some on-site observations to make sure that people are doing this according to a protocol, and the protocol will be standardized before we can go into the field. Okay? That's a whole different approach to what I said the first time around, which gives the impression, and should, that in fact you're paying attention to what's going on. You may want to review and audit logs. If you're doing something with a log, if you're collecting data, how many times do you look at those? Are you just going to wait till the study's done and discover, oh gosh, guess what? There's 35% missing data. Oops. And that happens all the time. It happens all the time. I sometimes talk about double data entry. When data is transformed and entered for analysis, we're going to do 10% double data entry for review, and do this, every 2 weeks and correct as we see things going. That's a sentence. But the sophistication level is going up. You know what I mean? I think that person is really covering the bases to making sure that this is quality data. Quality data. Project administration, you rarely see this, but when you see it, this is where it goes up. Talking about surveys, how are you going to handle like paper surveys which we used to use? How are you going to handle this? How are you going to track it? What's the method you have in place to ensure that the product being delivered? Okay. What's the data management hardware and software? What are you doing here? Are you going to just collect it and throw it into a box? Where are you going? Documentation. People that say they're going to keep a trial log, right? A prospectus that reviews the steps of the operation. It can be reviewed not only at some episodic level to make sure things are happening, but it can be used for scaling if in fact the outcomes come out positive is really cool. So if you built something that if I come to you and say, gosh, you have this really cool project, I would love to see how to do this, and you can show me a log of the activities and how you did it. You can show me the schedule for some of these quality assurance things. You can describe to me the process of handling the data. Reviewers love that because dissemination and implementation is kingdom, right? So if you say, I'm going to do that, it's a sentence to say that. You don't have to describe the detail of it. The fact you say, I'm going to do it, it's your point. People say, wow, okay, that's good idea, good idea. Archiving, securing, all those things. More description about how you're going to do the nitty-gritty stuff of implementation is really valuable. And you'll do better. Score higher. Project management is another one. People never describe the management structure, who's in charge, who's not, what roles they have. Do I go to you if there's a problem, or do I go to you? You know what I mean? And again, these are small statements, you know what I mean? We're going to create a management structure that, and you can put in a little chart, a little tiny chart. At the top will be this person. She'll talk to these 3 people who will be managing the field staff. They will have a protocol in place that the data will be reviewed every 2 weeks. If there's a problem, they'll go to this person, that kind of thing. Again, it shows a level of sophistication in implementation studies that's highly developed. Just say, well, we're going to do this. It's like the old, well, you guys are too young to remember Andy Hardy movies, but the Andy Hardy movie, which is, famous set of actors. Judy Garland was one of them, and what's his name? Andy Rooney. And it was always a story where, mom was going to lose the farm, and so they put on a play, and they do it in the barn, and they get a bunch of people come, and they say, okay, that was the sort of Andy Rooney thing. It was sort of like, if you do that in the grant, well, we're going to do this thing, and we'll save the barn, And he said, well, how do they make the costumes? You know what I mean? If you can't explain that away, somebody's been brilliant, there's been brilliant. I think it's important to you have multiple co-investigators or multiple PIs. You need to have a conflict management model in play. You
need to be able to explain to people what will happen if there's a problem or an issue or disagreement. And in most study sections, actually with multiple PIs require that in the grant. There's a whole section you have to put in and check for FOA. So they'll tell you that, you look for it. And they'll say, you need to explain how you're going to solve problems. What's going to happen if there's disagreement. So if you and I are doing something and you say, hey, I don't think that's smart at all. I think that's stupid. I say, are you kidding me? This is the way you got to do it. How do we resolve that? Because it could kill the project, right? And so he said to do about that. It's smart. It's just smart. Yeah, look at grants that are multiple PI grants. They have to include that. They actually have to describe how you're going to resolve conflicts and how you're going to resolve issues that come up through the team. You know what I mean? And usually that's like two parts. So like in multiple PI models in my world, there's a clinical person and there's an applied person, right? And the clinical person oftentimes is not talking to the applied person. And we may have issues that come up because of that, so we have to resolve it. So those were the final examples. I got a little section here on limitations. We talked about that a bit, so I'll just let you read this. But you need to describe limitations. And there's different kinds, bias limitations, confounding factors, that kind of stuff. You need to describe the limitations and how you're going to resolve them. People that don't describe limitations, your reviewer will describe limitations for you. Okay? And that doesn't help. They don't describe them in a way that's productive for you. I'm going to jump down. I talked about power in here and validity, but I'm going to let you guys wrestle with that because I'm almost out of time. But I have a few more things to hit on here. Let's talk about grantsmanship real quick and fatal mistakes, okay? Writing style, it's sort of silly to say this, but it warrants it. Be clear and succinct. Don't go waxing philosophic and, going on for long narratives and stuff. Be short, be clear. Remember what the reviewer's doing. The reviewer's reading 9 to 12 applications in a condensed amount of time. And if I have to slug through wordy, lots of adjectives and stuff, I start getting tired. You know what I mean? It's just fatigue. So being clear and succinct really helps. Really, really helps. Use active versus passive voice. People do that all the time. I gave you an example. An active voice is, we have analyzed the results. A passive will be, the results were analyzed. Okay? Be active. Take credit and go for it. Tell a story. I tell this to everybody that I work with as mentees. You want to tell a story. A grant is a story. And you want to tell me the story. So if I told everybody in this room, said, tell me about a movie you just saw, and you described the movie, that's telling me a story. I don't need to know scene by scene per se, but I need to know the story. So if you read your grant and you can't figure out the story, if somebody read it and they can feed back to you, it's a succinct story, it's not written well. So think of it in those terms. I think using graphs, models, and other things where possible is a good idea. Breaks up the page, gives more white space. I love to see it. When I get grants and they got embedded images and stuff like that, that's usually good. And some people are visual learners, others are narrative learners. So that way you cut across both sides. Do not put in a table and then give me full narrative of the table. That's wrong. Okay, so if I have a table, I can see the table, summarize it, point out something in it, but don't say, now let's just go through the whole thing in a narrative way too. That becomes redundant, and you should have done that. Signposting. This is one of my personal ones. I think you need to tell your reader what you're going to tell them, then tell them what you want to tell them, and then summarize what you told them. Okay, I know it sounds a little silly, but you need to say, we think this, and we're going to take this approach. Here's what the approach is and stuff. This is why it's really cool. This is why we use this approach. You know what I mean? It's a little redundant, but you don't know where I'm going to skim and where I'm not. You know what I mean? So signposting, telling me where you're taking me, I could sort of see it and stuff. That helps the reviewer. I think you need to describe the consent process. I've seen grants get crushed on this. Happens all the time. You simply saying that there'll be a consent form doesn't cut it anymore. You need to say, what's the consent process, including how to deal with those who refuse to participate. If you sit down with me and I say, do you want to play, and you say no, what am I going to do with that? Okay, thanks, you're out of here. Let me have the next person. Okay? So these are small descriptions, guys. These are 1 or 2 sentence deals. But if I say, well, in the case of people that refuse to consent, we will ask if there's any issues that in fact contribute to this thinking. Would they like to be contacted for future opportunities? Are they okay with the consent process, or were they concerned with some aspect of it? You know what I mean? That alone, just that sentence will get you points, because it shows you're paying attention to your sample. And you're looking at it sort of in a more refreshing way than just, we're going to consent everybody. Where am I going to consent? Am I going to do that in the room on weighing you on the scale? You know, I saw a study that did that. They were actually going to put a woman, obese women, onto scales, and while they were being weighed, try to consent them. And, well, there's something wrong with that. It's not inherently wrong, because it was an efficiency deal. But it's like, are you kidding me? You know, and you know, I remember the review session, and you said, this person doesn't understand how that works. Done. Okay, they're done. So describe your consent process. Describe the complete consent process, including how to deal with those refused. Note proposed reading level of consent form and solutions for those who cannot read. You need to say, we're going to write a consent form. It's going to be geared to a 4th grade level. And for those that can't read or have trouble reading, we will offer them the ability to do this on an interview basis. Okay? Finally, here's some fatal mistakes. Wait until the last minute to write your grant. Really stupid. You know, if you're under me and I'm helping you write a grant, you will write it multiple times until we're happy with it. So, you know, don't wait until 2 weeks before it's due and try to crank it out. You usually don't do as well. If the funding mechanism doesn't match the project, that's a fatal flaw, and it happens all the time. Read your RFA, made that point. You have a weak statistical plan. You don't explain how you're going to use or analyze the data. That will get you crushed pretty regularly. Or you have low power. You know, I need 200 people, and I've only got 600 people to choose from, but I'm going to get all the 200. You know, no, you probably aren't. And so that's going to pop you out. You have no backup plans of any kind. You don't talk about your limitations. That's what that means. You're not going to say, if this happens, we'll deal with it this way. Even if the way you're going to deal with it, I don't agree with it, at least you showed me you're thinking about it. You have lack of expertise in a key area. That's a sure sign that you need a co-investigator who does have that. You are poorly organized. You don't have an organizational plan. You don't explain to me how the process is going to work in the field. You need to give me an organizational schema. You have weak or missing hypotheses or a conceptual framework. Now, does everything need a conceptual framework? No, but a lot of people look for them in reviews. You know, so it's usually pretty smart to include it. Lack of significance, we talked about that. If it's not important, it doesn't matter about the rest of it. You've got to sell me about the importance. And it's not the importance that you feel, it's the importance that the field sees. You know what I mean? It's got to be bigger than you. It can't just be, well, I think this is really important because I'm passionately involved with this. You know, great. I'm happy for you. I don't see how this is going to change the rest of the world. You have no innovation. You're not doing anything different. You know, it's been done 9 different ways. You just have a new population. You won't get funded. And its last point is it's too ambitious. You're trying to do way too much. Too big of a study, too many people, too many variables, too many specific aims. People, especially if you're an early stage investigator, people look at you and say, you don't have a track record for that. People who do these really big, gigantic studies are highly skilled and highly experienced, you know what I mean? And they usually have multiple investigators. I mean, now you're talking about multiple sites, you know what I mean? They do it in more than one place. And so if you're going to do that, then you need to be careful how you solve it. Yeah?
So a while back, in the format, they also said they were only going to allow 2 submissions of the proposal, but I think that's changed.
That has changed. They've gone back to at least 3. Because 2, what was happening was you send it in a second time and you don't get the same study section, so you get a new study section who finds new stuff. And so you corrected all these problems with the first review, but the next review said, yeah, that's all fine and dandy, but hey, guess what? There's this problem, and this problem. So it gets a non-fundable score again, and you're done. So they allowed for 3, and sometimes they actually allow for more, depending upon what the reviewers are saying is the issue. Sometimes the issues, you just need to add more people to your team. You just need a better team to pull this off. The science isn't bad, it's just a team.